For centuries, this royal family ruled with unquestioned authority. Their power shaped nations, laws, and belief itself. But history only remembers what it is allowed to remember. Behind the crown lies a truth carefully buried, not because it was false, but because it was dangerous. The palace was never meant to feel welcoming. It was designed to overwhelm. Every tower, every stone wall, and every narrow window served a purpose: to remind anyone who approached that power lived here and that it was permanent. Generations passed beneath these walls believing the same truth: the crown would outlast them all. To the people, the palace symbolized order and protection. To the crown, it represented control. From within these walls, laws were issued, borders defined, and loyalty measured. The royal family did not simply rule the land. They shaped how power itself was understood. But what the palace showed the world was not how power truly operated inside. Public ceremonies were the crown's most effective language. Every movement was calculated, every symbol carefully chosen. These events were not celebrations of unity, they were performances of loyalty. The people were not invited to understand how power worked. They were taught to trust it. Stability was presented as obedience and obedience as safety. Over time, loyalty stopped feeling forced, it became routine. And routines, once established, are rarely questioned. Yet routines only survive when no one asks how they began. When ceremonies ended and the gates closed, the palace revealed its other face. Corridors grew quiet. Conversations ended abruptly, doors closed not with force, but with intent. Servants began to notice patterns, meetings held after midnight, guards stationed where they had never stood before, sealed letters delivered without record, carried by men who never spoke. Official documents continued to present an image of order. But beneath that image, decisions were being made that would never appear in history books. Silence became the palace's most valuable tool, until one silence became impossible to ignore. One morning, a trusted advisor failed to appear. His absence was noticed and then deliberately ignored. No announcement followed, no explanation was offered. Within days, his name disappeared from schedules, correspondence, and official mention. It was as if he had never existed. The court understood the message without it being spoken. This was not an accident. It was procedure. Service to the crown did not guarantee protection. It guaranteed silence, but silence leaves traces, especially when someone begins to look for them. Power rarely announces itself. It operates quietly, efficiently, and without witnesses. By candlelight, documents were signed that altered lives far beyond the palace walls. Orders were sealed, not debated. Decisions were finalized before questions could be asked. This system was not chaotic. It was refined over generations. The crown learned that fear did not need to be loud, only consistent. And the most effective form of control was not force, but certainty. Until the records themselves began to disagree. Beneath the palace, far from public halls and ceremonial rooms, existed another world. A place untouched by applause or loyalty. Here, records were stored that did not appear in official histories. Ledgers with missing pages. Decrees altered after being signed. Margins filled with corrections no one acknowledged. These were not mistakes. They were revisions, deliberate attempts to align reality with the crown's narrative. History was not erased entirely. It was quietly adjusted. Truth, it seemed, was never destroyed. It was simply buried deep enough to be forgotten. But buried records have a way of resurfacing. Outside the palace, patterns began to emerge. Those who questioned royal decisions rarely vanished immediately. Their disappearance followed a familiar sequence. First came isolation, then reassignment, then silence. Carriages left the capital under cover of darkness. Destinations were never recorded. Villages remembered faces, but never names. The crown did not rely on violence alone. It relied on uncertainty. No one knew exactly what happened to dissenters, and that uncertainty was enough. Fear thrives best when answers are absent. Yet fear leaves behind witnesses. Over time, fear replaced law. Not written, not announced, but understood by everyone. People learned when to speak and when to look away. Questions were swallowed before they were formed. Loyalty became a survival skill. Children grew up hearing stories not meant to be repeated. Stories that ended abruptly without conclusions. The message was clear, some knowledge carried a price. The crown rarely needed to intervene. The people enforced silence themselves. But fear cannot erase memory entirely. As generations passed, official histories were refined. Chronicles were rewritten, names removed. Events reframed to reflect divine order rather than human decision. Royal historians were not tasked with recording what happened. They were tasked with preserving what should be remembered. Contradictions were dismissed as myth. Missing years explained away as clerical error. Over time, the edited version became the only version. And once written enough times, a story begins to feel true. Until someone notices what doesn't belong. Centuries of control left cracks in the royal legacy. Stories no longer aligned. Dates conflicted. Records contradicted monuments. The myth of perfection began to weaken, not through rebellion, but through inconsistency. Small fractures that could no longer be ignored. The crown remained powerful, but its narrative was no longer seamless. Because no system, no matter how carefully built, can fully control the passage of time. And time was about to reveal what power had hidden. Centuries later, the silence began to weaken. Not through rebellion or scandal, but through study. Historians noticed inconsistencies buried within official records. Dates that did not align. Signatures that appeared too often or not at all. At first, these were dismissed as clerical errors. But the deeper the research went, the harder it became to ignore the pattern. These were not random mistakes. They were corrections made after the fact. And patterns invite questions. When fragments were placed side by side, a larger picture emerged. Disappearances followed disagreements. Edits followed internal conflict. What appeared chaotic in isolation revealed precision when viewed together. A system designed to respond swiftly to dissent and erase it just as quickly. This was not the work of a single ruler, it was institutional memory. A method passed down, refined, and protected. But every system has a flaw. The darkest secret of the royal family was not a single crime or scandal. It was the system itself. A structure built to ensure control outlived any individual ruler. Advisors could change, kings could fall, but the method remained. Truth was never confronted, only redirected. Opposition was never crushed, only removed from memory. This was power perfected through patience. And the system was still active. The crown's greatest achievement was not domination, but amnesia. Without memory, there could be no accountability. Without accountability, there was no resistance. The people obeyed not because they believed, but because they remembered nothing else. The system taught generations what to forget. And forgetting became a form of loyalty, a loyalty enforced without force. But memory has a way of returning. The final act of control was never violence, it was quiet. Silence refined over centuries. Silence embedded in law, culture, and tradition. The crown learned that the absence of truth was more powerful than any decree. The palace gates remained closed, not to protect the people, but to protect the narrative. Until the present day began asking questions the past could no longer answer. Today, the palace still stands, its towers admired, its halls preserved. The crown celebrated as heritage rather than authority. Visitors walk its corridors guided by carefully curated stories. Tales of tradition, stability, and greatness passed down through generations. What remains unspoken is not denied. It is simply omitted. The system no longer needs enforcement. Memory has already been shaped. But omission is not the same as absence. History does not accuse, it waits. Unanswered questions remain between the lines of official records. Gaps too precise to be accidental, silences too consistent to be ignored. Each question challenges not just the past, but the comfort of certainty. And certainty, once disrupted, cannot easily be restored. The truth does not demand belief, only attention. and attention is slowly returning. The true cost of absolute power was never paid by the crown. It was paid by those erased, by voices silenced before they could be heard, by lives reduced to footnotes or removed entirely. Empires often measure success by survival, but survival alone does not equal innocence. What endures is not always what is just, and endurance does not guarantee forgiveness. The crown still shines, polished, respected, preserved, but its shadow tells another story. A story not of individual cruelty, but of perfected control. A system designed to survive scrutiny by avoiding it. The darkest secrets are rarely hidden deep. They are protected by tradition. And traditions can be questioned. The most powerful royal family in history did not survive through strength alone. They survived by deciding what the world was allowed to remember. History is not written only by the victors, but by those who control silence. And the moment silence is questioned, power is no longer absolute. If this story made you think differently about power in history, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share. Because the truth doesn't disappear when it's hidden. It waits for someone willing to listen.